All right, we're on.
All
Hello,
right.
everybody, and welcome to Dessert and a Movie. We're going to have a really fun conversation tonight, I hope, about this wonderful film we all watched, The Intouchables. Let me start by apologizing for the typo. I got a message from someone. They said, I watched The Untouchables. I don't know
Oh,
what movie you're talking about. And
oops.
Kathleen was very profuse in her apologies. We must have had a typo somewhere. So if you watch The Untouchables, good for you. It was good, but that's not what we're talking about tonight.
Oh,
We're here to talk about the film, but we're also here at the kindness of the Capital Federal Bank and also the Katzmans, whose foundation, as I always say, pays the bills and keeps the Zooms coming. So thank them for that when you see them, when you go there to get some money out of the bank or
yeah.
whatever you do there. I do mention that. Um, I thought we could talk for a minute about our desserts because we're all in this thing together. If anybody wants to tell us what you had for dessert, then I'll tell you what I had. If you're telling, I'm telling.
We had Oreo cookies.
Oreo
Sounds
cookies.
good. Sounds good. Anybody else?
We
Strawberries and
had
ice
a heavy,
cream.
heavy supper, so we couldn't have much dessert.
Okay. Because I got home at 2 in the morning, I intended to go over to Tous les Jours and get myself a cream puff or something, but I didn't get out of the house today. Here comes somebody else, but I will tell you, I just finished because I was in Southern California. I just finished a quart of mineral water, which I heated to boiling, in which I put a teaspoon of sea salt and the juice of an organic lemon.
Ooh.
Just saying.
Nice.
That's the latest thing from Southern California. I was there for graduation. My granddaughter got a PhD, and all the graduate students are drinking this.
Wow.
They all look like goddesses. Of course, they are all 28 years old. What can I So that being said, let's get started and talk about. I just kind of wondered if you want to do, we do the hand sometimes at the end, but at the beginning, how many? Give this film a rating. How did you like it? Four, three, four, five,
Five.
four.
We did watch The Intouchables, so we
Yeah.
may be out of it.
That's good. Okay.
There is
Well,
a movie, The Intouchables.
yeah,
Yeah,
there
it's
is.
about the handicapped man who's paralyzed from his
Right.
body
Yeah.
down.
That's what we
Uh-huh.
watch.
Yeah.
The Intouchables. That's the Intouchables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
English translation is untouchable. So yeah.
Yeah, there is the old Elliot Ness one, The Untouchables with Kevin Costner, but that one is about Al Capone.
So The Intouchables is correct?
It is
Hmm.
correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. Although I think in French, yeah, we'll get into that. So yeah. All right. So we were pretty happy about the film. I think while we're talking, if we just want to, if you're comfortable using the chat box, feel free to put a comment or a question there. But if you want to just unmute and ask the question, that's
We need
fine
to
too.
mute. I'll do it.
Yeah, we all
Let me
try
see.
to mute up
Okay.
just so we don't have too much feedback. And I want to introduce the person that's personally right at the moment on my right, but I don't know where he is on your screen. It's Jeff King. I met Jeff King at a community dinner maybe a month ago or longer. And he has a nonprofit called Transmuto. He deals in relationship work, enriching your personal life with better relationships, and also is a Sith Lord. No, I'm kidding. He's a master of the Enneagram, which some of you may have heard of, and he will be sharing some of that with us, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing to add to this movie. Um, and so I guess let's just start with Jeff. And as we're going, and talking, uh, I thought this movie was great. If there was a scene before we get into it that you want to mention that you thought was particularly funny or touching or really spoke to you in any way, if you want to unmute and tell us about it or something, you know how yeah, Jill.
So there's a scene when our caretaker arrives at this opulent house And he's never been in a house like that before. And he's like a little kid in a candy store and he's touching stuff and he's acting inappropriately. And it's really rather funny. When he gets to his bedroom, he flops down on the opulent bed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fast forward. Then he's been there a while. He's acting more as we would have if we were in that house. And then his I guess it's a cousin comes in, the one who's in trouble.
Yeah.
A little kid, not so little kid,
Mhm.
teenager, troublesome teenager. And
Right.
he's coming in and he's going, "You live here," and he's touching stuff and he's acting inappropriately. And our caretaker guy says, "Hey, get your hands off there, come here, behave yourself." And he gets into his bedroom and he says,
Yeah.
"Now don't touch anything." And he slams the door and leaves. He flops down on the bed just like he did. I
Yeah,
thought that
Yeah.
was hilarious.
Yeah, that was
yeah.
really cute. Anybody else have something that they want to mention that they thought was particularly charming?
Robert,
I
what I
thought,
wondered about was, this is taken from a true story, correct?
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so was the actual caretaker, was he African American? Because
Actually, I did pull up, I did pull up something. I could go into that if you'd like right now. I did pull up some information about him. He was actually from Algeria, but I'll find my information here. It is a true story. The fellow Philippe, that was his name. He actually is not only a dreadfully rich person, but he's also a duke. So in places where they have dukes, that's pretty close to being the king. So he was definitely a person of some kind of title. I'm looking here for my thing. Abdul was the name of the young man. In our film, it was Driss, but Abdul was a young man from Algeria. Let me see if I can't find it. I want to read it because it's much better than me telling the story. I'm looking. I'm sure I saved it. Here we go. The true story. Um, let's see. Let me back up. Abdul brought good humor, spontaneity, and humbleness, which contrasted greatly with the norms of etiquette to which Philippe was uh, accustomed. Philippe had a wealthy family. Um, I like this particularly. Starters, Philippe thought throughout his working life when he interviewed this guy, he had always had to interview people. He could see in Abdel an employee who had a lot of potential beyond his bad boy looks because it says here, Abdel might have been the kind of person you would think twice about, maybe three times about before hiring. He lived his childhood in a family of humble conditions with 8 siblings, developing an impulsive personality and a very bad temper. At the age of 10, he had to move to Paris to live with relatives who would take care of him. And at 16, he was expelled from school because he stole from his classmates. Uh, Instead of correcting himself at 18, he went to jail for the first time for stealing cameras from tourists.
Mhm.
Nice portfolio. With such questionable actions at a young age, his future was bleak. But the one thing that made him special as a person was his charisma that captivated and endeared others to him from the very first moment they met him. While serving a 1.5 year prison sentence, he was given the opportunity to get out in 10 months if he reinserted himself into society by attending a mechanics class. He didn't like the mechanics class, but he quit immediately, but started looking desperately for something to do. He ended up applying for a job as caretaker for a millionaire aristocrat and a tetraplegic, and his sick wife. The wife was alive at that time, but he didn't know that that would change his life. So that really is the backstory. The backstory goes on to say that, well, it says more than that, but we could talk about the film. The backstory goes on to say that they both married eventually. And
Yeah.
maybe you noticed in the film that at the end they had pictures of them.
Mhm.
I guess I could keep reading to you about that because this was interesting. Um, some people might wonder after you realize who this Philippe was, and they both wrote books about their friendship. Um, it just said that Philippe said he didn't feel sorry for me. He was irreverent, cheeky, and had an outrageous sense of humor. And I suddenly found out that I was enjoying life again. And he had to justify it with his family. And it said here they would pull pranks, like pretending that he was having a fit and, speeding, stuff like that. And Philippe said it helped him get back on track. And I thought this was particularly poignant. Philippe says, pity is the last thing you need. And I think this is very insightful. Maybe Jeff could speak to this. Pity is what someone gives you because he's afraid to take care of you. And I think that's pretty profound.
Yeah.
He said, I don't care if he is out of jail. I need him. And he became a friend afterward. So I'm going to stop reading to you from the internet. It's almost as bad as the person who reads a PowerPoint at a business meeting. Let's ask Jeff a couple questions.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and your nonprofit and
Yeah.
relationships, because I think this
Sure.
one was very much about relationships.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to be a part of this amazing group. And I love the fact that you guys are looking at movies and kind of just, exploring them to see what they talk to us about in real life. But so I spent most of my professional life in pastoral ministry. I pastored a couple of different churches over the course of my years. And then in the one of my pastorates, I went into a graduate program and earned my master's in marriage and family therapy. And I did that for a while, then went back into pastoral ministry. So I've always been very interested in relationships and how relationships work, what makes them effective and what makes them maybe counterproductive and even toxic at times, and looking at it from kind of a systemic way. And then stepped out of the pastoral role in 2018. And then in 2019, formed my own nonprofit, which Laurel mentioned is called Transmuto. And I work primarily with people to help them, people and couples, and then also organizations, and helping them to understand themselves more effectively and create better relationships. So this theme of relationships really has been a kind of a heartbeat for me throughout the years. And also with my nonprofit, do kind of spiritual guidance, spiritual direction with people. But my primary thing is I'm a certified Enneagram teacher, and the Enneagram is a personality typing system that helps us understand kind of how we orient towards our world, how we relate to our world with kind of basic beliefs, basic fears, basic motivations. And the Enneagram identifies 9 basic types of how we do that. And then from that, be able to create a more accurate and compassionate understanding of ourselves, which then also opens up for to be able to have a more open and accurate understanding of other people. And mix with that a sense of compassion, to know that we do what we do and other people do what they do for what they believe, we believe is logical reasons, but they may not always be effective. And so just be able to see that from a perspective of compassion and grace, which opens up the opportunity for meaningful dialogue and then moving forward in our relationship. So that's kind of a background of what I do and what I'm about. So,
Is there a question out there? A couple questions. They're just pretty simple. The first 3 questions that are in the chat was, could most quadriplegics breathe well? And he doesn't have any trouble. And so I couldn't answer that. I'm certainly not a medical person, but
right.
they did reference that occasionally
Mhm.
the breathing was very hard for him. And the title of the American version was called The Brighter Side, I believe. There was after this out, it was really well accepted of course, in Europe. And I first saw it in French. They did make an American version of it with Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart.
Hmm.
I did see that. I didn't think it was as good as this one. Um, it didn't quite. And if you're all looking like you never heard of it, which is probably because it wasn't as good as this one. That tends to happen sometimes. But anyway, so yeah, Jack said he'd seen that, and I had seen it as well because I was curious. It's a lovely story. Jeff, do you think could you explain the relationship between these two people a little bit, or tell us how that happened? Was that like a 1 in a million kind of a thing, or?
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I wonder how often such opposites appear to be opposites seem to
Yeah.
attract. And even in marriages, I think opposites attract, and then we irritate each other over time because the original opposite that feels like an attraction, because it often fills in the missing components of what we have in our natural personality makeup. And we're
Right.
attracted to that other person because a sense of completion. But that completion of what they offer also creates a bit of a threat to us because it is different and it can stir up our own anxiety. And I found this film very fascinating in that because I kept waiting for the big conflict between the two of them. And it never seemed to materialize. They just seemed to really connect and accept each other's differences in a very beautiful way. And yeah, I kind of wish that all relationships were kind of like that, where it wasn't, because I think most relationships have a natural friction because there are two people who are being themselves. And even though there are pieces that attract us to that, there are also pieces that irritate us or threaten us or create anxiety within us. And that's where often our sense of conflict arises. It's not so much we don't love them, it's that we don't understand them. And the way they are creates a sense of threat to us. And we don't quite know how to work with that. So these two characters, Driss and Felipe, I think really worked really magically around those differences. And then in the end, they kind of found out there were a lot more similarities than the differences. And I think that's also true in any meaningful friendship or long-term relationships. We agree much more than we disagree, but the disagreements can create such a sense of discomfort and threat that becomes the main focus rather than staying focused on where is it we agree on and what is it we're shooting for. So I thought it was a beautiful story with that.
Yeah, I watched it a second time, and I noticed at the beginning that Driss really did not want to put those elastic hose on that man. I mean,
Yeah.
he would rather, he was like horrified by
Uh-huh.
that. That was like, and Driss was what's the newspeak? He was casting some shade on Philippe at the interview because
Mhm.
Philippe was casting shade on him. He was saying,
Sure.
"Oh, you're on the dole. How does it feel to have people taking care of you?" And he said right back to him, "And how do you feel about it?"
Yeah.
So right
Mhm.
off the bat, we are a little antagonistic, and also he made fun of him as he was trying to put those stockings on the man. He was saying, "Oh, I like your earring you got on." Yeah, I mean, he was like giving him a little bit of shade there and all of that. But then later on in the film, they buy one and they each have one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it went from a pretty and falling asleep, not listening to the baby monitor. He was a perfect mess as a
Mhm.
caregiver. But they not only went to friendship, I felt at the end they really loved each other.
Yeah, very much
They
so.
were very, very much uh, the best kind of friends there could possibly be.
Mhm.
So good that they could let go of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was real beautiful. So, is this just to not get too political? Do you think the world could use a little of this?
Oh man. Yeah.
Please speak, doctor. I'm listening.
I think what the other thing that really impressed me about this story and how the movie portrayed them was that our differences don't have to be so threatening. Um, there's a thing. I have a master's in marriage and family therapy, and one of the modalities that we worked with in that is this idea of understanding our differences And for many of us, we live kind of in a dualistic kind of thinking where a difference means that you're wrong. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong. And anything wrong threatens us. And to shift from that to say, what if it's not wrong? We're different, but yet legitimate. That each person brings a legitimate perspective to the table. And I think we see this so beautiful in this story that what looks like their drastic difference, either from the color of their skin to their background to whatever, they were able to shift out of you're wrong because you're different to you're legit. And I want to know your story. And they share their stories in that very intimate all night trip out into they're at 4 a.m. in some cafe or whatever, sharing very vulnerable stories. And if we could do that with each other, we would find, I think, that we are very much alike. We all have our pain. And both of these two people, even though that one comes from opulent wealth, another comes from poverty and all the complications that come from that. They both had their trauma. They both had their pain. They both had their fears, but they also both had the things that brought them alive. And they were able to find that common ground. And so it's different, but yet legitimate. And when we can mix those two things, I think it's like phenomenal what we can create with that, which I think the story does a great job of doing.
Yeah. I wrote down my note here, what was the magical mix? I mean, I guess we're going to have a moment and think about our own relationships here. And maybe this is something that we'd rather write about or think about alone. But how does since you've decided to devote your life to getting the word out about the Enneagram, how can that be useful? And maybe somebody wants to learn a little bit more about
Sure.
how to get along with others. I mean, obviously, as a country, in our families, we're so polarized, and we have to find a way to listen to the other person. And this duality of thinking, the idea that both are right.
Yeah. Well, let me share a diagram.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so. Let me share a diagram with everybody. I think I have the capacity to do that here.
Okay. Ooh, screen sharing. I see it.
How about that?
I'm impressed.
The magic of all this.
Yes.
So let's see here. All right. So what the Enneagram offers is a kind of a format and a roadmap of sorts to help us understand there are kind of 9 ways of seeing the world. And with that, we're all kind of striving for the same thing. We all want to feel secure. We all want to feel loved. We want to know that we're important. We want to know that we're safe. We want to know that our needs are going to be met. And these are kind of 9 orientations or ways of seeing the world of how to get that done. And so with this diagram, you see the circle and all the 9 different approaches of this, what we would call personality types, all belong on the circle. So we all belong. We're all valid. We're all important. And each one of these perspectives has validity and merit to that, but they're just different. So, and with this too, since it's on a circle, the circle represents unity. And in this is that there's no hierarchy here. There's not one better than the other, more right or wrong. Each one offers certain strengths that we all need for our own survival and also the survival of the species. But they're also bring unique perspectives and automatic responses to the world that we live in. And with that, then each of these also point to, while each one of these perspectives offers some validity and merit, if that's the only thing that we operate from, it also brings limitations because we need all 9 types. all 9 types are important for the survival of the species. We need the perfectionist. We need the one who says this is the right way to do this. If you drive across the bridge, you're hoping that a type 1 put that together. Right? Or if
Yes.
you're going to get brain surgery, you don't want that commercial. Ah, good enough. That's, yeah, but that's a time we need specificity and
Okay.
to be correct.
There's a quick question that came in here.
Yeah.
Can a person have characteristics of more than one type?
Yes. We actually have all 9 types in us because we're all human. And the circle represents that we all have 9 types in us, but there's one type that's going to be our go-to dominant kind of autopilot response to the world. So the type 1 is always going to be looking for what's the right way to do this. And the flip side of that, what's wrong with this picture and how can I fix it? Okay. And so another word for the perfectionist is the reformer or the corrector. So that's just kind of their orientation is what's wrong. And I know the solution to this. The challenge of that, they can get very rigid. It's only my way. And it's really difficult to embrace other people's perspective with this. And also they tend to have a very strong inner critic and they're harder on themselves than they are anybody else because I could have done it better.
No.
Right.
I'm not that guy, but yes, I'm
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah. And sometimes people will say about type 1s, they wake up in the morning and they already feel guilty because they assume they let it down somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. So type 2 is the helper, the giver, and their orientation is the way I am safe, the way I belong, the way I am loved is if I meet other people's needs. And so their orientation is always about other people's needs. And how can I meet them? And they have like a radar that picks that up. In fact, Radar O'Reilly on MASH would be the epitome of the type 2.
Okay.
They know what's needed and they're right there with it already. Boom. Their downfall is they don't see the validity of their own needs. And so they tend not to take care of themselves and they give. And with that, they kind of lose themselves in the process. And sometimes struggle with boundaries. They give more than they can afford. But they bring a great gift of generosity and help and service to others. Type 3 is a performer. They also have the radar out there, but they're looking at what's going to be successful in this situation. How can I get things accomplished and look good doing it? Because I'm looking for the pat on the back, the attaboy. And so we have a very type 3 culture in America. We love what sells. We love success. We love productivity. The challenge of the type 3 is, can I just be? And they could be human doers versus human beings. And they tend to lose themselves of knowing this is me because I'm so busy performing for everybody else. Type 4 is the romantic, the artist, the individualist, and they're all about their deep feels and how can I give authentic expression to that? And the way they belong is if I can give expression to me and try to fill this empty gap that I have in me. And so often the artists, the poets, the songwriters, the whatever artistic expression would be the type 4 because they feel deeply and they want to give expression, but they never quite feel like they have enough to truly belong or to be enough. So they're always looking at what's the missing piece and striving to meet that. Type 5 is more this, I'm going to pull back and observe. They're going to analyze because they feel that the world is very demanding. And the only way you can survive in this world is if you can be an expert or have adequacy and know your stuff. So knowledge is kind of their safety net. And so they're always observing, always analyzing, and they tend to pull back and watch the world rather than participate in the world. So you have a lot of engineers, and they even approach their relationships kind of as engineers. How do these pieces fit together? And they tend to be very out of touch with their feelings in this. So if you ask a type 4, what do you think? They're going to give you feelings. If you have type 5, what do you feel? They're going to give you thinking. Because 4s feel, they think with their feelings, 5s feel what they're thinking. Does that make sense? And so, so again, that's kind of their pullback with that.
Okay, quickly, Shelley,
Yeah.
so what's the name of this diagram?
This is called the Enneagram. This is the kind of the basic construct of this personality typing system that we're looking at. Type 6 is the loyalist, the skeptic, and they're always thinking there's bad things going to happen and what's our plan to be ready to deal with it. So when COVID came along, type 6 has said, hey, we've been waiting for this. We already have our safety packet to put together. Because they're great troubleshooters, they've already oriented that the world is dangerous. You better have a plan. And they're always looking outside themselves for what's going to provide me safety and security. And so once they once you earn their trust, they're going to be very loyal to you. So type 6s tend to gravitate to very authoritative, clear, logical ideology, religious perspectives, political perspectives, because we're the right group and everybody else is a danger. So stay in our group and you'll be safe. So that's kind of the type 6 approach.
I just want to interject
Yeah.
there. Our granddaughter joined the Marines.
Uh-huh.
And while she was in the Marines, the commandant was a Jim Mattis, or they called him Mad Dog Mattis, because Marines always have to have a big,
Yeah.
tough man. He was brilliant.
Mhm.
And my husband always enjoyed one of his comments, which was, and he also served in Trump's first cabinet until he finally had to leave the room.
Uh-huh.
But his comment was, be polite, be professional, and be prepared to kill everyone in the room.
Wow.
With that,
Yeah.
that sounds like a total loyal skeptic.
Right. Yeah, very much so.
I
And,
just thought I'd throw that out.
yeah, the type 6 is kind of a love-hate relationship with authorities because they're always going to question, do you really know what you're saying? Because I'm looking for somebody I can trust. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure yet, but once you convince me, then I'm all in. And it's interesting. I came from a pastoral background, and I don't know if there's any hard peer-reviewed research on this, but the thought is that most church people are type 6s. We have more 6s than churches because they're looking for certainty, they're looking for security, they're looking for the clear answers. And what better system than religion or politics? Because we're right and they're wrong, and because they're wrong, they're a danger. So stay in our group, stay in the fold here. And I've worked with, especially back in I guess the early 2000s, when the whole Catholic priest and all of that started coming out. I worked with a priest very closely doing some coaching with him, where he was totally disillusioned and devastated that the system he had put so much faith in had betrayed him. And he didn't know if he could stay in the priesthood. And this is the pain of the 6. Can I trust my own gut, knowing, even if it goes against the standard status quo of my group? And it's torturous when what you put your trust in betrays you. It's true for all of us, no matter what type we are, but particularly for 6s, because that's how they see the world. I got to find my safety and my security. All right. 7s are the Epicure. And the Epicure, from a philosophical perspective, Epicureanism is, how do I avoid suffering? And 7s are all about, how do I avoid suffering? I don't want to feel the pain, so don't box me in. I want to look out in the future, always looking for the next thing out there in the future that's going to be the magic bullet. Or I just saw the play rendition of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and yeah, like the Oopa Loopa, always like I want it, I want it now. That's kind of the 7 thing, is that's going to be my answer, because I'm looking for what's going to give me meaning, joy, happiness, and it's always out there somewhere. And so 7s are said to kind of this pocket full of silver linings that they're going to throw at every problem. Here's the positive side to that. Because they don't want to get stuck in pain, and they don't want their options to be limited. I just talked with the 7 yesterday morning. And she says, I could play in the playground all day long, but if you close the gate, I'm going to freak out, because I got to know I have the option to leave if I want to.
Huh.
And that's a very type 7 approach. I have to have my options. Then the type 8 is the kind of take charge, challenger, protector, boss kind of person. They're very justice oriented, and their world is kind of boiled down to strong and weak. And if you're weak, you're going to be taken advantage of. So I have to be strong. So 7s or 8s come at it with a very strong, assertive personality approach. I'm going to push against all whatever obstacles. I'm going to overcome them. I'll take charge. I'll get it done, because they see the world is in the strong, weak dualism. And so their task is to learn that vulnerability is actually a strength, but it's really hard to convince them of that.
I bet.
Yeah. And then the type 9, you see them sitting at the top. They see all of their 8 perspectives and they want to bring them all together. We're the harmonizers, the mediators. We see everybody's side, and we're great at listening with empathy and non-judgmentalism. But our struggle is we don't know what our own position is. So we go along to get along, because our greatest fear is conflict. And I'm using the first person here because I lead with type 9.
Okay.
And the idea of conflict is like, it makes my lips turn blue.
Yeah.
And so we tend to go along to get along, merge into everybody else's position, but kind of lose ourselves in the process. And then when it comes time for us to take initiative and to assert ourselves, we're like, that's really scary for us, because we're afraid if we say what we want, it'll ostracize us. It'll create conflict. It will create discomfort for other people. So we're okay if we know you're okay, kind of thing. So that's a real brief outline of the 9 different types. And of course, everybody does it uniquely, and there's all kinds of complexities to each type, but that's the general overview of this. So anyways.
I feel like my head's going to blow up, but a lot of information, and
Yeah.
you're saying that we all have all these things.
We
which
do.
A little bell rang a few times for me, and a couple times a yuck came up. So obviously that's not my idea of a good time. Could you explain the arrows to us a little bit?
Yeah. So each type, and I was saying this, that once we understand our type and why we approach the world and see the world we do the way we do, we can then with accuracy understand it, and then hopefully give ourselves compassion to know there's a good reason why we come at it this way, based on our upbringing, our environment, just the way our brain is wired. It makes sense to us. It's life or death to us. So it's not wrong. It's just that it's limited. And if this is the only play in the playbook, then we're missing the gifts of all the other 8 that are out there. So to give ourselves a accurate understanding, and then meet ourselves with compassion, that opens up then the ability to understand other people more accurately and not make assumptions about them or judgments about them. And then also meet them with compassion, because they're operating the way the world makes sense to them, even though it's vastly different than how we are. So with that in mind, the goal with understanding the Enneagram is, how can we integrate as much as we possibly can all 8 types and draw from what we can learn from each one, and give space for them to be who they are and bring their gifts to the table and not judge them as wrong. And I think we see this in this film. We see Driss being very kind of let's go out for the adventure and let's, explore and don't limit yourself. And it's easy to assume that Felipe is very withdrawn and scared and so forth. But in reality, he also has adventure. The way he got injured was having adventure. He was paragliding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so easy to judge the other person. Well, you're different. You must be wrong. And let me fix you.
Mhm. That brings up a question
Yeah.
that he brought up. Can you give an educated guess? Obviously, you're very
Uh-huh.
educated as to what the personality types the characters
Yeah.
in the movie. I mean, I never thought of
Just
that.
on a surface level, and one thing, ethics with the Enneagram is you don't want to project on people overly much.
Oh.
But just in my observation of this movie, and I watched it 3 or 4 times, I would say Driss is more type 7. Let's go get out there. Let's live it. Let's have the adventure. Although when he gets into paragliding, he's scared to death.
Was it
and
there?
and
Yeah.
I would say Felipe probably presents more as a type 5, very in his head, very afraid to put himself out there with the lady friend that he's corresponding. Much safer just to write letters than to actually be face to face. It's very type 5-ish. Let
Yeah.
me think, let me analyze, let me stay in my head, but I don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
But yet, when it comes down to it, they both kind of meet each other. And it's interesting, you see type 7 is connected with type 5 by a line.
Uh-huh.
And so they both have, this would be a great example how we both want the same thing. We both want to live, but we're just going to come at it in a different way. 5, I'm going to live if I can think it through and play it safe and be calculated. And there's validity to that. You don't want stupidity. Type 7 is let's get out and experience it. Right. And there's validity to that too. But there's also a place where you need a little bit of both. Nice to have some planning, but it's also, you got to finally pull the trigger and go for it.
Right.
And I see just from a surface standpoint, that would be my inclination.
Mm-hmm.
Other people might see it differently, and that's totally fine. But that's be my leaning. So great question. I thought about that a lot as I watched
I
the
thought
film.
about that. I wondered about that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Of course, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have my picture. I have poison ivy, and you don't want to see my face right now. That's the reason I'm not using it. But I kind of disagree with your analysis of
Felipe.
Thank you very much. I didn't remember his name because the only place I see him as that description is with the woman. And it's very central. But if I had a disability of that nature, people lie on their online descriptions for much smaller things. And would be very unnerving. Plus, he's a widower who loved his wife. So there's 2 reasons that I would take that completely out of his person. I'm not sure what personality he is, but I would take that completely out of the decision making of this possibility. And believe me, I don't understand any of this stuff. My kids have done this Enneagram, but I have not. But I just kind of wanted to throw that in because of what you said. I don't think that's a good reason to have judged it.
And I think you're onto something because there's a whole nother dynamic to this is what is the role of trauma and loss in our lives? And what are our coping mechanisms that we take on in order to deal with that and still survive? So that, and I would agree with you on that raises questions for me. I wonder what Felipe would be like had he not ever been injured or lost his wife. Because he has this sense of adventure in him, which at our core, we would say all 9 types do. But for whatever reasons, we cover them up or mask them or protect them or deny them in order to survive and to cope with whatever life is given to us. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the wild card here. We don't know for sure without talking to him. That's why it's kind of dangerous to pigeonhole people with a certain type, whatever personality system we're working with, whether it's the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs. We really need to let them tell their own story. Yeah, and who knows, maybe Driss is just putting himself out there as a coping mechanism, and that's not his real true self. I don't know. That's why I say until we talk with them personally and let them really dive in, it's just a guess. So good. So good point. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So
I think
keep talking, Jeff.
Laurel, you mentioned, so what's the lines and all that? So while we have all 9 types in us, we'll have our dominant. So I'll just speak for myself as a type 9 up here on the top. So as a type 9, I have direct connection with 4 other types. The 2 on my side, which would be the 1 and the 8. And we call those wings. And it's kind of like a Venn diagram. There'll be some overlap of that help makes us our unique expression of whatever type we lead with. So for me, I have much more of the type 1 trait in me. I have more perfectionist and a strong inner critic than I do type 8, who has more directness and access to anger. I'm very uncomfortable with anger, whereas 8s are very comfortable with it. It's energy to get stuff done. So I lean more heavily to the 1, and that influences my 9-ness more than 8 does. The other side of that, 8s are very passionate, and there are areas of my life I experience that passion. So I have a little bit of that 8 in me. The other thing that the other 2 numbers that we're connected with is how we're connected by lines. So for me as a 9 up here, I'm connected by follow the line to 3 and also to 6. And when we say this is our growth areas for us, that there are aspects of type 6 that really are important for me to integrate into my type 9-ness. For example, type 9 tends to be a little bit too trusting, and we like to take people at their word because it doesn't create conflict. We want our peace. We want our harmony. However, there are people in the world that will take advantage of that. And I've had that experience. And 6s are all about that. Like, oh, you don't want to trust that person. What about this? Remember, they're always thinking about what could go wrong with this. And what are you going to do about it? And so that's a good wake-up call for us 9s, not to naively trust everybody because it's more convenient and easier to get along that way. It's more important at times to ask really hard questions. So there's that aspect of it. There also, for me as a 9, growth areas for the 3, who is all about putting themselves out there and asserting themselves, which is very uncomfortable for me as a 9 to assert myself. So this is a good growth area for me to learn, okay, how do I, especially as I have my own nonprofit, small business, kind of a small business owner, I have to market myself, which is highly uncomfortable. But just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not doable or not important. So how do I push that discomfort through that discomfort and get the job done? And 3s teach me how to do that. The other side of that is both of these other numbers also show me some danger areas for me. So the type 6, the danger area is to be paralyzed with fear. And I've gone through a couple of seasons in my life. I'm 66 now, so I have some experience with this. I've gone through a couple of seasons in my life where things felt like they were falling apart, which is like the 6's worst nightmare. And I would just be paralyzed with doomsday. It's all over with. I just as well go kill myself. And so whenever I go there, that's that flashing light on your dashboard to say, hey, something's going on you need to pay attention to.
Check engine.
Yeah, check your engine here. Is it really that bad? And how do I work with that so I don't slip into that depth of despair and just give up? because that's what the unhealthy 6 will do. The world is just too dangerous, crawl in a hole, protect yourself kind of thing. The other thing here is that for a 9, the downside of the 3 is it can be all about performing. So and I've found myself at times trying to be somebody that's going to sell rather than being myself. And that just doesn't work. As a pastor, there were a few sermons I was trying to be the flaming evangelist so I could really wow the crowd, and which would be a very type 3 kind of thing. And it just fell flat on its face. It's like, okay, come back to yourself.
Yeah.
And so whatever type we are, that's always kind of the task. Where do we abandon ourselves? And then how do we come home to ourselves and be who we are?
I'd like to ask you a
Yeah.
little bit about this.
Sure.
I was intrigued by it because some writers that I know are very much involved in it, or they talk about it. People that I really respect.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've really got their head on and all that kind of stuff. This has been around. Can you speak a little bit? I mean, this wasn't just made up by somebody in
Right.
a magazine. I mean, where
Right.
did it come from? What's the history? I don't know what I'm displaying here on the Wheel of Fortune, but what?
That's a great question. Yeah. So
Yeah,
the
what?
Enneagram really has its sources of wisdom. It's what we would call perennial wisdom.
Okay.
It's the wisdom that has kind of been part of our human experience throughout the centuries. Um, and there are a variety of sources of the Enneagram. And there's some debate about how far back it goes, but we do know in Oriental Eastern culture with some both spiritual but also just philosophical perspectives, we find some of the Enneagram. A fellow by the name of Gurdjieff is one of the key informers of the Enneagram system as we know it today. But he studied Middle Eastern religions, philosophies, and observed human behavior and motivations from that perspective and that lens. And so there's a piece of that. There's a piece of this comes from Christian mysticism and the desert fathers and mothers who went out into the desert to escape and discovered the 7 deadly sins. And they realized, oh, we brought our shadow with us. And there's an element of that informs the Enneagram. There's mystical Hinduism and Islam, and then there's just non-religious basis as well. So all of that kind of there. And Gurdjieff put it and began to kind of formulate and write about it. And then there was a guy down in South America that began to take all of this information and kind of codify it, formulate it, and began to put it together in the form that we have it now. And then his protege brought it to the United States. First of all, there's kind of 2 sources that I understand it that brought it to the United States. One was this protege that began to teach at the University of California, Berkeley back in the 60s, which those of us, we remember what Berkeley was like back in the 60s. Pretty radical, thinking outside the box, new age religion, whatever. And so he began to teach it there, and the students just went berserk with it. They thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And one of them was a lady by the name of Helen Palmer. And Helen took her notes and then wrote a book. And she actually got sued by that guy, that teacher. And they went through this whole process, and the courts found that this was more public domain. And so she wasn't, what do you call that? Not libel, but whatever, plagiarizing. It wasn't plagiarism. And so her book survived. And so that kind of started the fire. The other source of it that brought it to the United States was the Jesuit priest who used it in spiritual direction, and one of which was a man by the name of Richard Rohr. And Richard learned the Enneagram under his own spiritual direction. And then he brought it in to the Christian perspective. So you have Helen, you have Richard, who are writing now about it or teaching about it. And it began to kind of go. So the way I see it is like there's all these little streams, tributaries that feed into the river. And then it's became, I don't remember if it's Icazio or what the other guy's name is out of Latin America that put it in the 9 types, like as we know it now. But I was saying this too, is that this is an evolving system. We're continuing to learn. We continue to apply it to other approaches from psychology, spirituality, somatic work, perennial wisdom, all of those things. And so it's not like a cast in stone, dyed in the wool kind of thing. It's a living and breathing system that we continue to learn from. So,
Wow, how's everybody doing?
sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there.
No, that was great. I mean, because when I first heard of it, and Richard Rohr is the one that I read, and I really enjoy his work, and I think he's brilliant. And I thought the Enneagram, and truth be told, I thought, gosh, is this sort of like the quiz you take in the magazine to find your favorite boyfriend? And I thought I just kind of wanted to discharge it, but then I thought this man is brilliant.
Yeah.
And he's all over it, and I want to know more about it. But then the film also spoke so beautifully to finding a way to have a relationship with somebody you don't know, you don't like, you would never cross paths with.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I am on that circle, but I want everybody to settle it all over a pint,
Well, and I would say, I would say this, that wherever you are and how you experience this is that there's some things we have in common. We all belong. And no matter what type we are, we want to know that we're safe, that we're loved, we're understood. And this gives us kind of a pathway and a roadmap of being able to do that. It puts into words, this is how I see the world. I'm not crazy. There are other people who also see the world like me because they share my type. Yeah. But there are also 8 other types out there. And how can I learn from them? And one approach to the Enneagram, which I think is beautifully expressed in this movie, is I see this as archetypes. So for Jungian psychology is also a key aspect of the Enneagram, how we understand it, with archetypes, and then understanding our shadow. So there is something that we can learn from each of these 9 approaches to the world. And I see that with these 2 individuals in this movie, that they were willing to get outside their comfort zone and let me experience your world, whether it's in the taste of music, art, paragliding, getting in a car rather than that van, and let's go live life. And like,
laughing through the opera. That
laughing. That's classic. I love that. I love that scene. Yeah.
Jeff, this has been my head is really full, as is my heart. Thank you for
thanks for inviting me
in. Work. Jeff has a podcast. I'll send everybody contact information if they want to know a little bit more or study. I did go to our beautiful library and I just checked out a book about the Enneagram. It came out. It was the Enneagram for Dummies. And I thought,
I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah. No. So I immediately returned it. So I would like to know more. And thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, thank you for the invitation.
We're a minute over. I do want to say that our next Dessert in a Movie will be an amazing film. The libraries this summer, our theme for the summer is Color Our World. It's art-based. The film is Loving Vincent, and it's about kind of the mystery surrounding the death of Vincent van Gogh. Or Gogh. Interestingly, because everybody said he killed himself, well, did he? And a woman in Poland who was one of those types on that wheel, she came up with the concept of making a film of the story, but every single cell, it's illustrated, but it's an oil painting in the style of Van Gogh. So it's just beautiful to see it. And our expert's going to be a woman who is curator of this Bergen Zandren Museum in Lindsborg, because this particular artist is called the Van Gogh of Kansas. So we're going to get all painty and
Wonderful.
wear your sunflowers. And I hope to see you after you watch Loving Vincent and we hear more about that. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you for being with us, everyone. You go out there and help everybody feel loved, cared for, protected, well fed, and give them a laugh once in a while.
Yeah,
Yeah. We're all on this thing together.
you bet.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Good night. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.